All right, this is a quick update to the new CCD football game that I've been working on. I wanted to bring everybody up to speed on changes to the rulebook. So this is version 1.2. There are no rule changes. There are, however, changes to the place from scrimmage, key blocker, base tackler, and intended receiver based on era. Era, E-R-A, era of play. So the first version 1, everything is a base place from scrimmage. This is how the game is being play tested. It's being designed based on these D6 charts. However, yesterday in continuing play test and work, I wanted to further refine the game so you can choose a chart. So there's early era plays. So now if you want to play, let's say, the 1930s, 20s, 30s, 40s, you would use this chart in which tailbacks carry the ball more. This would be your rating that you use, player rating. And then, of course, fullbacks, and then, of course, wingback, which would be the SB, scat back. These numbers have changed as well, so the weight of who carries the ball has changed too. So it's not just a name change, it is a position. It might be a position change, but it also will be a weight change in how often it's the tailback, fullback, or wingbacks carrying the ball. Early era blocking, there is a new position, blocking back, because in early era single wing and double wing Notre Dame box type formations, you would have a tailback, not a quarterback. Tailback generally was the guy who would get the pitch and he could throw the ball if there was a pass. So really a tailback in a way was your quarterback. However, he was still a traditional running back, so to speak. But there was a blocking back. So you would use the fullback's rating if blocks came up. Okay. And then, of course, these are the other key blockers in early era blocking. Early era tackling, you're going to see right ends, all the defensive linemen, a strong backer, and a middle guard, which is your middle linebacker. And intended receivers, you're going to see fullback, tailback, the right end, which is the tight end, the left end, which is the split end, and your wing back and your left wing back, right? And it tells you right here what these represent, what your right end and your left end is, right? Okay. So also what's important is the base playtest game, the game I've been, the base version of the game. And by the way, special teams don't change for any of the eras. I'm not going to specialize. I'm not going to tweak punts, returns, kicks, and field goals for era. Field goals would probably be the PATs and field goals would probably be the most important. Special teams change for era, but I haven't decided I want to spend time on those special teams for a number of reasons. They're not that big a deal, except for field goals and place kicks. But long story short, the base game. This is how I've been play testing the game. This is how I anticipate you'll play the game in your fictional rules. But if you want to set your fictional world in early era or play historical teams, you would want to use these charts. If you're going to play modern era Canadian rules, you'd want to use these charts. So now we have a weighted ball carrier, single back. This would be the half back on your roster charts. 4 would be the second back. This would be your scat back on the charts. And 5 and 6 would be your quarterback, and your quarterbacks on the modern era and Canadian rules should have a second rating. They should have a run rating and a pass rating. So the rules would be changed that when you roll up your quarterback, you would roll his pass rating and his run rating. So your QBs would be dual threats. This is representing modern. I mean modern, I'm talking today, like 2015, 2017 to today, and Canadian football. Again, in modern and early, we're going to have tight ends blocking more often. So we're going to have we're going to have their rating. So whether they're a 2-rated tight end, you're going to use their rating, period, whether they're receiving or blocking. And then our blockers, and then our tackling slightly changed, but not a lot. And then our coverage, you're now going to see fullbacks, halfbacks, split ends, tight ends, flankers, and slot back again. But what's important about the era charts that you need to pay attention to is the zone rules. So the zone is different in every era. So zone in the base game is pretty dramatic. If you're in a zone, your coverage is everybody on your team is going to be in the worst possible. They're going to give up the most possible yardage. But if you run against the zone, they're all going to be like all pros. This is the base fictional base game that I've been playtesting. But in early era, zone changes. In early era, again, I remember teams generally ran like a 6-2-3 umbrella with a left halfback, a right halfback, and a deep back. So you're going to be looking at coverage still being poor, but they don't stop the run as aggressively because, again, in the early era, running was king. So those guys come in rushing. There already were 6-8 men in the box. So you don't get basically not everybody on the defense suddenly an all-pro against the run. So you got to remember that the zone rules change based on era. And then the modern era, zone rules are 1-1. So if you go into a zone, every single player on your team is average. They're going to be a 1 no matter what. Which means if you have a lot of defensive players who are Pro Bowlers, meaning they're 0-rated players, and you use the zone, you're going to reduce the quality of those players. But you also can avoid if you have a lot of plus coverage guys. So in the Canadian rules, if you sit in a zone, everybody's going to be average on both sides of the ball. So zone is a great way to just lock everybody in as an average defensive player. And in the next era, the final era, is the 50s through the 90s. This would be, for me, this is the heart and soul of pro football for me. Again, I've said it before. To me, the 70s is the golden era. The 80s was the most influential era of my life because I was a young man playing football in the 80s, and that's where all my heroes were at. The 70s for me is, I think, the golden era in history. And the 50s were crazy, exciting, balls out, broken field football. And the 60s was really conservative, kind of smash you in the mouth, and early 70s smash you in the mouth football. So, but I'm combining all of this era into what I call the modern era, where we started to see teams use 2 wide receivers, right, instead of 3 backs. So again, what's changed here is the weight and how we know which player to use ratings for. So the weight, top back. We got to remember in this era, especially this late 70s, 80s, and 90s, teams generally had one dominant carrier. This is where we had the 2,000-yard backs. This is where we had the O.J. Simpsons. This is where we had the Walter Paytons. This is where we had the, every back that carried the ball 300 plus times. So in the 50s, we had the beginning of Jim Brown, but in the 50s, much of the 70s, both backs kind of shared the backfield as far as carries. But we define that your top running back, whoever that may be, your halfback or your fullback, is getting the ball 1 to 4, is getting the ball 60% of the time in this era. The second back, which will be the lower of the two, will get the ball, 30% of the time, 35% of the time. All right, so you got to remember, we didn't just change what's going on here, we changed the weights. All right, 50s to 90s, key blockers. You're going to see the tight end playing a larger role again, center playing a big role in the 50s, 90s era of blocking, and then, of course, your other offensive linemen. It's tough because I only have 6 digits to work with. I would want the fullback to be in here as well. The 90s, early 2000s, there were some unbelievably talented blocking fullbacks. Lorenzo Neal, Howard Griffith. There were some really, truly remarkable blocking fullbacks. But we're covering 40 years, so I think we go with tight end. All right. But you could customize your own era charts, by the way. This is just determining whose ratings come into play. All right, the 50s and the 90s tacklers, again, we have that here. And then we have our 50s to the 90s era intended receivers and coverages. So, fullback still catching passes, especially in the 60s. You saw fullbacks and halfbacks. There were lots of fullbacks and halfbacks that split catches in the 60s and 70s out of the backfield. Split end, tight end, flanker, traditional pro set football with a third down back or a slot, either a slot receiver or a scat back. All right. The difference is instead of a nickel being employed to cover the scat back. The free safety would be employed, as opposed to the base game, which again is going to assume you're going to create fictional teams and play the base game. It is the nickelback that's going to be handling your slot. Again, the zone rules change. The injury card's the same for every era. I'm not going to tweak that. The injury duration's the same for every era. So there are these pages that give you different eras. You can just print out this page and use this for your 20s, 30s, 40s. You can print this if you want to play modern football or Canadian rules. And you can print this if you want to play 50s, 60s, 70s, whatever. Or you can, of course, very easily make your own. And again, the zone here is different, and this is very important. You got to pay close attention to these zone rules. Defensive teams in the zone here are everybody's average in the zone, but they will use their personal rating versus all runs. So the zone doesn't automatically turn a defender into a good run tackler or into a bad run tackler. They get to use their personal rating. But what it does is it puts everybody on your team at a 1. So this is a way, if you have a lot of +2 coverage players, you just play zone and you get to reduce them all to average players. The birth of the zone really started in the Super Bowl era. The 34 Kansas City Chiefs were kind of perfecting a zone defense. The Miami Dolphins were really working on a quality zone defense with Don Shula in Baltimore and, of course, Miami. So the zone really became a standard defense, really. So we won't give bonuses or punish run ratings, their rating for runs, but you will be able to use the zone to kind of reduce your negative pass coverage min. So you're going to see more. Let's put it this way: you're going to see a lot more zone in the 50s to 90s era of play. I mean, if we're talking about the late 80s, early 90s, the zone blitz became huge, right? The 4-3 defense and the 34 zone blitz. Pittsburgh was using that 34 zone blitz to get to quarterbacks quickly. The 80s, late 80s, early 90s, the West Coast offense. They needed to find a way to get pressure on quarterbacks in 2 steps, 3 steps, because it was nigh impossible to cover these receivers on quick slant patterns and things like that. So, and because you would have guys drop back and choose the open target as opposed to timing routes. So, one way to do that was to go to a zone and blitz, surprise people with zone blitzes. You might drop a defensive end into coverage and blitz the middle linebacker. A team like the Steelers might actually, instead of having their end pressure, he might literally stand up and drop into coverage, and the outside backer would blitz in his place. So you saw a lot more interesting blitz packages in the late 80s, early 90s, and up to the 2000s. Anyway, so there's just gives you some different eras to choose from. Outside of that, the rules have not changed yet in any way, and of course I'm still working on the FAC deck. But I wanted to give everybody the opportunity to see how you can customize your own fictional leagues or your own era charts. Seeding that D6 to weight toward how many, in your, heck, you could even design these charts for individual teams. I mean, you could have the 72 Dolphins could have their own chart, right? How often their fullback carried, their halfback carried, their third back carried, who made the key blocks for the Dolphins. So you could customize, you could even do custom team charts for all of this. I don't recommend it because then it's really easy to cheat and weigh your best players. You customize your play chart and make sure you always get your +2 blockers all the time, which would unbalance the quality of the results. But anyway, everybody out there, have a fantastic weekend. Bye-bye.